Greetings. This is the one you've known as Jesus the Christ. Each death in your various lifetimes brings so much growth for your soul. There are so many ways that you die in your many lifetimes, and every way teaches something different. Life is full of lessons, and some of the most powerful and important lessons are learned in your last moments of life or in the months leading up to one's death, in the case of a terminal illness. Life often feels unfair, and painful and difficult deaths often feel unfair, but they are always wise from the standpoint of your soul. Your soul chooses the type of death you'll have because it serves your soul's growth to have that experience. You are never being punished. Every death you've undergone has always been chosen or allowed by your soul because that experience was deemed to have something to offer you in terms of your growth. Whether you do grow from that experience and how much is up to you to some extent, but even the most resistant and angry person is learning something that will change how he or she is in subsequent lifetimes. As I've said many times, you can't help but learn from your various experiences, even if it appears to you or to others that you aren't learning or haven't learned anything. One's apparent reactions to an experience such as death, such as anger, sadness, bitterness, and resistance, are the ego's response to a situation and don't accurately reflect the deeper effect of that experience. You learn in spite of any anger, sadness, bitterness, or resistance. While these emotions are happening on the surface, deep changes on other levels are going on that are often imperceptible to the one dying and those witnessing the death. After death, when the individual looks back on that experience in the life review, the lesson becomes obvious, and the individual can feel gratitude for even that experience. There is great wisdom in the design of one's life and experiences. Learning is built into life in ways you can't imagine. For instance, when something horrific happens, such as child abuse, this can serve the soul by developing the person's compassion or driving that person into a healing profession or one supportive of children, such as education or child welfare. Many life purposes are founded on just such intense experiences that drive one's interest in a particular direction, often for many consecutive lifetimes. Souls gain in wisdom and skill and become specialists in an area by taking on similar life purposes over a series of lifetimes. A difficult death also often drives a soul to pursue a particular life purpose in subsequent lifetimes. For instance, someone might become a doctor or nurse in the next lifetime because he or she was inspired to serve in that way by a difficult death. Or perhaps someone who was fatally shot will become an advocate for gun control or peace in the next lifetime. And, of course, difficult deaths also balance certain weaknesses and cultivate strengths. For example, someone who died as a result of a reckless or foolhardy act will be much more cautious in the next lifetime. Or someone who murdered someone might lose someone dear in his or her next lifetime. Please understand, however, that such losses are never punishment, but intended to help people gain empathy and learn the preciousness of life. And please don't conclude that every loss in your life is such a teaching. There are many reasons for losses, not the least of which is that loss is a natural part of life. But most of all, the lessons at death are spiritual ones. As people grapple with the loss of the things that give them identity, they discover who they really are and what can never be lost. Who are you if you are no longer young and capable? Who are you when your body stops working? What is it that exists beyond the body? Are you still you? What are you still capable of? What many discover as their body ages or becomes incapacitated is that their body and looks actually have little to do with who they are. They're still the same inside, the same consciousness, and they still have the same personality and tendencies. These are the things that make them who they are and make them unique. For those who are overly identified with their looks and physicality, aging and becoming incapacitated offer particularly important lessons. But everybody is deeply identified with the body and needs to see that the body is not that important in terms of who they are. They have a body, but they are not the body. They are the consciousness that uses the body. They are what exists beyond the body. Importantly, they are what loves and laughs and experiences life. Sometimes this is all one is able to do, and then you can discover that loving, laughing, and experiencing is enough to make you happy. This is one of the most advanced lessons that can be learned. When everything is stripped away, there is still the ability to love and to experience, and potentially to laugh and be grateful for life. What a surprise! Most people think they need so much to be happy, and to discover that indeed so little is actually needed is the most wonderful discovery of all. How freeing it is to find happiness in simply existing and in loving whatever you're loving, which could be anything. Everything is worthy of love. Life becomes very precious for many at the end of their lives. They see life in a way that they've never seen it before. They see through their divine self's eyes, and it is all good and all precious. Granted, this doesn't happen for everyone, but the potential exists to experience this if you don't get overly caught up in anger, frustration, regret, and other negativity, as you continue to think of yourself as the false self and continue to want the same things the false self always wants. It's impossible to be happy at the end of life if you continue to want the things your ego or false self wants. That's why death is such a powerful spiritual catalyst. To not suffer greatly at death, you must, once and for all, give up the desires and dreams of the false self. When you do, you discover the grace, love, peace, and gratitude of the divine self. This is the blessing of a terminal illness. The knowledge that death is imminent takes away your future. When you believe you no longer have a future, what good are your desires and dreams? All you have is now. A terminal illness teaches you to be in the now like nothing else, because it strips away your future, and with your future go your dreams and desires for your life to be a certain way. Nevertheless, many hang on to life while they are terminally ill, still hoping for a future, rather than accepting the life they're having and delving into that experience, the rich experience of their body and their identities falling away, which is a most precious and profound experience. For some, giving up the false self's desires and dreams will be impossible. However, that doesn't mean they failed at death or that they didn't learn something, for they have another chance to see things differently once they're out of the body and shown by guides and loved ones how life and death might have been different. In the afterlife, you're able to look back on your life without feeling bad or regretful that your life or death didn't go better. It becomes obvious that nothing is lost, no harm has been done. The divine spark of God is there, alive and well, as you exist in the afterlife. In the afterlife, you're able to experience your divinity in a way that you might not have been able to when you were alive. In the afterlife, you're in touch with the truth about yourself, so viewing your previous lifetime's flaws and mistakes is not painful but enlightening. Like watching a movie of someone who didn't know any better, you're steeped in the forgiveness and compassion of those who are helping you to see the truth about your life. So the life review is actually quite joyous. It's impossible to list all of the possible things you do learn from the various kinds of deaths, but I will do my best to try to give you a sense of this. In addition to learning that you are not the body, which terminal illness teaches masterfully, death also teaches many of the basic lessons that human beings must master. Importantly, death teaches compassion and empathy as a result of the suffering that's often involved in both the death itself and the anticipation of death. Whenever there's great suffering, compassion is being learned, whether that's apparent or not. Experiencing difficulties gives you compassion for those undergoing those same difficulties. You've walked in their shoes, and you know what it's like. The various deaths are some of the most important and intense experiences your soul will ever have, and it's important that everyone have these experiences because they are rich with rewards. As with all the extreme challenges of life, your many deaths teach you many things you can't learn any other way. They develop character, which is to say they develop you spiritually. What do I mean by this? For one thing, death is humbling, and humility is central to one's spiritual growth. What is humbled? The ego, of course. Its greatest desire is to be in control of life. This is also its greatest illusion, for it has little control over what happens in life. At death, it becomes inescapably clear that you are not in control of life. As people face the fact that their life, their story is about to end, they often feel regretful. Is that it? They want the story to continue or to be able to rewrite it, but they never were able to make life be the way they wanted it to be, and neither can they at death. This is humbling, and this must be accepted. Even those who have had what would be considered very successful lives are often disappointed at the end of their life, since the ego can always think of something more it would like to do or have experienced. For the ego, life as it is never enough. This disappointment in the face of death is unfortunately very common. But if it can be seen that this disappointment is just the ego's constant state and not a measure of one's life, then acceptance of life as it is and death is possible. At death, you face what your life is and what your life was. The story has an ending after all. It is what it is, and it was what it was, and this must be accepted. Acceptance is one of the greatest lessons in life, and it isn't mastered until your very last lifetimes. Death helps you see that you are not the master of the universe or immortal. You are flesh and bones like everyone else. Any grandiose illusions your ego might have had must be placed at the feet of death. It is an unavoidable ending to everyone's story, but not an ending to you, surprisingly enough, as you soon find out. Death, especially one preceded by illness, is often an exercise in forbearance, patience, acceptance, and living in the unknown, as you wait and wonder at each step, what will be the outcome? You've always lived in the unknown. You have never known what would happen. But in critical times you wonder, is this it? Will this end in my death? Is this how I die? You don't know, and you must accept that you don't know. You'll never know the answer to the question, when will I die, until you actually do. Living in the unknown can be especially challenging when you're ill. Will I recover? What if? What will happen next? These are questions the ego desperately wants answered, but ones it can never have answers for. With illness and death, the ego has met its match. It's stymied, frustrated, unable to continue as usual. With grave illness or with terminal illness, the ego faces the greatest challenge of all, one it will eventually lose. What hopefully rises up in place of the ego is the strength, courage, peace, perseverance, patience, and compassion of the divine self. Grave illness and death are opportunities for these qualities to come to the surface, for the divine self to shine through and become known and expressed. What is left when the body can no longer function? All of the qualities that make up the best of you: courage, kindness, patience, strength, wisdom, love, and perseverance. If you are so lucky as to have the ego drop away during an illness or before death, you're left with who you really are, and that is magnificent. Thank you for your openness to this message. I hope it will help you be fearless in the face of any crisis and death. I am with you always.